And this is always a very wonderful thing to see, is that it's really eye-opening to the mobility experts in how youngsters can talk about mobility as such a difficult and complex subject, but they can say a lot of good things about it because they are using some routes every day, and they use it in different ways than a lot of adults.
Hi, you're listening to Kid City, Växtvärket's new podcast about child-friendly urban development. And you just heard today's guests, Giselle Vervoort and Sabine Midema, from the organization Kind Samenleving in Belgium. We in Gotlab, we became aware of Antwerp and then of Kind Samenleving by looking for inspiration from other parts of the world on child-friendly urban planning, and we found Antwerp and we found place-based webs. We understood play webs as kind of a network of child-friendly streets that were developed together with children. That idea inspired us a lot. Imagine that this exists, webs of child-friendly streets, that is co-created with children. And it's in numerous Belgian cities. We felt that we wanted to get that in Sweden where they are. Imagine if there were place-based webs in Malmö and Stockholm and Gothenburg. How come Belgium has come so much further? When we found Kind Samenleving, we said to ourselves that we finally found ourselves in a different place. An organization that works for child-friendly and co-creative urban development that sounds like Växtvärket. Usually we feel like nobody does the same thing as we do, so we wanted to find out if this was true. Have we found our big sister from Belgium? Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you well?
It's a bit a grey day here today, but for the rest it's fine.
Please tell us about Kind Samenleving. What's your story and how long have you existed, and what is the mission for the organization, and what kind of organization are you?
So I would say in short that we're an organization that works on creating space for children and young people, and we're mainly working on this subject, spatial matters, mobility, and everything related to that. We have existed for a long time. We are actually celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. So apparently we already exist in some way since 1974. We were actually called Nationale Dienst voor Openluchtleven back then, which means something like the National Service for Outdoor Living, which was actually an organization that was a representative for playground work. And playground work is a sort of youth work that exists nowadays also in lots of municipalities. I think most municipalities in Flanders have it. It's a place where young people, where school children go to when there's a school holiday. They go there and they can play, and there's young people who organize some games for them, but it's also very free. They can play freely there. And this is actually what our foundation is. And in the 1970s and 80s, already the organization started focusing on broader topics, such as playing in residential areas, the design of play spaces, and also place-based policy. So it didn't stay with the youth work, the playground work. And then in 1992, the name changed of the organization. It actually changed into National Research Center for the Playing Child. So it became more a research related organization too. And then actually it started focusing on 3 different topics, which were the playground work, also after school childcare, which is the place where children usually stay in school, after the school hours are done. But the after school childcare was supposed to really focus on the interests of children. And then as a third one, the interdisciplinary research focused on play from the perspective of the right to play. And then because of these 3 topics became bigger and bigger in themselves, finally that has resulted in actually 3 different organizations, of which Kind Samenleving now is still one of them. And so the research part is what Kind Samenleving emerged from, and the name Kind Samenleving has existed since 1997.
And you are an NGO?
Yeah, so we are a Flemish local NGO, and we get our main fundings from the government from the Flemish government and the Department of Youth. But we also have a lot of projects that are coming from different departments, such as mobility, public space, or planning departments. But we also get questions from cities or villages to help them with their play space webs or any other questions on participation with children on topics of urban planning, mobility, playing outside.
And like in Växtvärket, we have designers, we have landscape architects and pedagogues. But what kind of backgrounds do you have in Kind Samenleving? Is it the same, or you have researchers as well, right?
Yeah. So we are quite diverse as a team. So we have some people who studied anthropology, for example. I've studied sociology, and I just finished my urban planning master's. We also have somebody who studied history, for example. So quite diverse. And Giselle?
Yes, I've studied urban studies, so also the socially geographical background. We're 9 people only, so we have grown, but it's not that many people still. So actually all of us, or most of us, we all do research. So there's not different departments. We have some subjects that some work on and others don't, but actually we all do research. It depends a bit on the topic, what kind of research it is. Sometimes it's more action-based research, but we all do it.
Mm. And you work like regionally, you have worked with a lot. Which cities in Belgium have you worked with so far?
So many.
All of them.
I think it would be a good idea for 50-year anniversary celebration to make a list of all the places and we have been and projects we've done. I don't know if it's possible. We still remember everything, but I think we've worked everywhere basically throughout Flanders and Brussels. We've worked definitely with all the bigger cities such as Antwerp and Brussels, of course, but also a lot of small places, small villages even. It really depends on the topic. And also because we are funded by Flanders, we are supposed to make sure we spread out enough throughout all the provinces. And there should also be a balance between cities and villages. So this is also reasons.
Yeah, and Flanders is not so very big, so it looks like we have to go to travel a long time. But most of the time we are there within 2 hours of traveling. So
yeah, tell more about this. That because you have a part of your income or a part of your economy is from the state or from the region, or how does that work?
I would say, I think it's kind of 50% of what we have as a budget is our structural funding that we get from the Flemish Ministry of Youth. In Belgium, a lot of subjects are regional. So most of the subjects we work on are regional Flemish subjects. So that's why it's a Flemish ministry. So that's 50%. And the other 50% is funding we get because we respond to tenders from the Ministry of Mobility or Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning. We respond to tenders they have, but also we just ask them for funding if we have our own ideas. For example, the project Sabine is still working on, Young Trailblazers. It's something that we went to the ministry for ourselves. We asked them for funding because we had a good idea. And then there's also the cities or municipalities who hire us because they just want a policy plan. They want to make a play space network plan, for example, and they ask us and pay us for it. Or when they want to do a specific participation process to develop a square or a park or things like that, they also hire us.
Yeah, and the main funding we also use to do research or to create new methods or subjects that we are new in. So, for example, in 2019, I started a project on girls in public space, and this is a subject we haven't worked on yet. So it was more of a research-based project, and this year I will also start a project on children who are playing with mental or physical disabilities. So this is a new field for us, and we use our fundings to research it and to create methods for local governments to do also participation with these groups themselves.
So you have like different branches that you work with, all your own initiatives, but also that cities come to you with their, but also that you have funding from the region. And do you have like do they give you like a brief for what you're supposed to do because you get this funding from Flanders?
Yes. We have to make sure that we reach a certain number of young people or people who work with young people or with children and youth. We have to prove that we actually do the participation processes and that we reach enough children with it. Or we have to prove that we make publications, for example, that municipalities can use themselves. So there's a lot of requirements to be able to keep the funding, yes.
Yeah, but the good thing is that we can create our own projects. Like we are the subjects we can choose ourselves. So if we feel like or we did like a research on playing outside, for example, and we have seen the numbers are going down, then we know for the coming 5 years we want to invest in more projects that try to get children more outside, for example. So
yeah.
And
this is your current cooperation between you two, isn't it? That project where you look at why kids aren't playing outside anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. So in 2019, we did a research where we counted the children who are playing outside. So we went to 7 different neighborhoods. And there we found out that children are playing 30% less in comparison to the research we did in 2008. So children are playing less outside, and we saw also some differences between boys and girls, for example. So that's what we found out. And then you have to ask, why do children play less outside? This is a research we did also last year. And we found out, for example, that they still have difficulties of finding a good place, a place to play, to get to this space because of the mobility problems, but also because of more social issues. For example, that the parents are not encouraging their children to play outside enough, or that they don't know the other children from the neighborhood, so they find it difficult to play with other children or to talk to other neighbors, for example. And these are all findings that we want to share to certain groups. So we are making a campaign for parents to inspire them and to also give them ideas how to play with the children outside or how to stimulate your children outside. So this is the campaign that we are making at the moment. Yeah.
No, I'm listening and I'm fascinated about what you have developed over the last 50 years and how you're now, when we've been studying, because we're trying to get place-based webs into Malmö and to Sweden. We've heard so much about Antwerp and your place-based webs there. So we're interested in hearing more about it. And the things we're curious about is, what is it? What is a place-based web? And the plan that you have in Antwerp, and how did you start to work with that? And we'll just start from there and see what where we end up. Big question, but
yeah, a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So maybe first, what is a play space web? And I think I could start, and then Sabine can maybe say everything I forgot. So it's actually a plan that you can use as a policy plan that we make to empower children's play in certain areas. Usually it's made on the level of a neighborhood or maybe an entire municipality. And it's based on a lot of different subjects and different layers that come together. It takes into account mobility of children. It takes into account the location of schools, also the location of squares, parks, play areas, places where children go to for their hobbies, etc. And actually, a play space web aims at creating a neighborhood or a city in which the play opportunities of children are as high as possible, to support them as much as possible in their own free play and their autonomous movement throughout the municipality or the city.
Yeah, maybe I have to add then things. So what is very interesting in making a place-based web is that it is involving different departments from the municipality. So most of the times the question comes from the youth department. But if you want to make this, you need different departments. So you need the urban planning departments, the mobility departments, the department of green, the technical department, for example. So we bring them together on one table, and they have to tell us how the situation is now and how they want it to be. And in this process, they get involved, and where it maybe was a subject only for the youth department, it's now something for all the departments, and they also know how to work together better in the future. And this place-based web is made in like a report. We make a report with a lot of suggestions on how it can be made better, but it has also a more technical part that we are making actual plans from it. So we make them in GIS, so Geographic Information System, which is used in the municipality to make other plans. So if they want, for example, to make a new neighborhood or to renovate a certain area, to redesign a certain area, then they can also take our plan or the layers in the GIS to see what we were thinking in this area or what is needed in this area. So it's a plan that can be used for 5, 10, 15 years, and also has suggestions for quick wins for doing things that can be done in 1 year, but also for long term, like in 10, 15 years, you can if you are going to renew a certain space, then you have to think about these and these things that we are saying in the plan.
Where we're at right now is that we're looking at your project that you had, and so could you please tell us an example of a process and its outcome? What is the specific outcome? What does it look like, and how do you do?
So maybe I can tell you about the one Sabine and I did together, because there were already some place-based webs made for different areas in Antwerp in the past years. And Sabine and I did one in 2022 together for the district of Antwerp itself. And this wasn't a very densely populated area, also very densely built area, but next to a big park. And actually in that area, what we always do with children is we look at the routes they take. What are important routes, so we can prioritize and tell the city, okay, this is the most important route that children take a lot that you need to redevelop, and you should try to create more playable spaces on this route. But in this area, this neighborhood, it was very difficult to choose one route because it was so densely populated that actually all the streets are used a lot. So what we did is, specifically here, we created different scenarios that can be put to use as soon as a redevelopment of a street is happening. Because they're not just going to redevelop an entire street when it's only about play space, but there's some other things that need to be done sometimes. So whenever there's an opportunity, they can look at these scenarios and use them to create a more playable neighborhood as well. And we have based these scenarios on the street morphology, because in this neighborhood, you have two different types of streets. The boulevards are wider streets with 3 lanes. So we have a scenario for that. As soon as there's a redevelopment on the boulevards, you can look at this. And we had a landscape architect who made different images that can be used to make these boulevards more playable. Then we also have residential streets. And also for the residential streets that are very that had a very typical morphology, they almost all look the same in that neighborhood. All the residential streets were very densely built streets with one-way motorized traffic and linear car parking. So we created a couple of different scenarios for that, or a couple of different images on how you can make those streets more playable. And then as a third scenario, we had the idea of creating mini squares in that neighborhood, because there wasn't a lot of extra space in the neighborhood to create entire squares or parks. But we try to give the imaginary to the city to show them that there's even opportunities in very small spaces to create a mini square with maybe a bench and maybe a small thing to play with, or some greenery to just already create small opportunities in the city whenever there's a chance.
And how is that? How is that? I mean, you're talking about a very densely populated place in Antwerp, and so there's a lot of cars. And have you been able to use this child-friendly streets as an argument to counteract car traffic in these areas?
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
I think this also has to do with it. It really depends on what kind of council you have. I mean, the people. So it really depends on what the mayor wants, or what the people working in the city, what they actually want. And I think it was quite difficult in this area specifically. But what was an opportunity there is that in Antwerp, they're also really working on climate adaptation. And a lot of the places we were working on were places that would flood in the 20-yearly rain floods. I don't know what to call it. But that's the reason why these streets will also need to be redeveloped in time, because we have to do something about the sewage systems and about where the rainwater goes. So I think we have to combine all these things, and creating a playable city is very easily combinable with climate adaptation, because it's always good to have more green in the city and more less hard surfaces for children to play on. So I think those are the opportunities we have to use and look for.
Yeah, and maybe I can also add is that you also have different types of streets, of course. So we were talking about like these narrow streets with 2 car parking areas, and then the one-way street. But what you see in Antwerp also is that they are developing more and more what we call woonerf, which is a Dutch word. How do you call it? Housing area, let's say, or an area and a street where the main function is living. And these streets are have different rules than other streets, and it's that you have a maximum of 15 kilometers per hour, I think, for the car, and that the priority lies for the pedestrians. So cars are allowed, and there are some zones where you can park, but not so much. And the idea is that children can play freely on the streets, and that the cars are more guests than the main user of the street. So I think slowly on we can see a change, and maybe it doesn't go that fast in Antwerp, but there are other cities, for example, Ghent or Leuven, that are going much further in this process of changing and prioritizing the slower mobility, so walking and biking. Yeah.
And then one thing we were talking about within Växtvärket, when we were talking about Antwerp, is that you get some funding from the city council, from the city. Why do you think they have chosen they choose to outsource these processes to you to Kind Samenleving instead of doing it themselves?
I think there are 2 main reasons. A lot of municipalities, Antwerp is a big one, of course, so they have a lot of expertise, but they don't always have the time to make such a plan. We are working on a plan for 1 year. We do participation with the children, and we develop quite a strong report. So you have to have the time and also the overview and the expertise on these subjects to make it. So for us, it's very important to work together with the municipality, so they can give us their information, and then we can make it into this place-based web. A second part is that sometimes it's easier for them to convince certain people or politicians sometimes when you bring in an expert from outside and bring in our own information and expertise, and we can also tell them and about other cities, compare it to other cities. Like they are doing it like that. Maybe it's also a good idea for your city. Or why do you do it like that? Maybe you can change it a little bit, you know?
Do you think that part of it could be also that it's about participatory projects? Because I feel like in Sweden, a lot of the feedback we get from municipalities and from people working within them is that it's a bit frightening to go out themselves and work together with the kids directly. It's not, a situation that they're used to. So for them, that's a threshold to step over.
Yes, I think in the meantime, of course, in Antwerp, they have the experience, because I'm sure they also, besides the projects we have done there, they also do it themselves. But it's definitely something that we see in a lot of municipalities. Often we have youth workers or other people from municipalities who come and join us at our participation moments because they want to see how we work, which is very nice. We also try to involve them whenever we can. I also think it's a very good idea for them to come and join us, because usually they try to find ideas to do it themselves. So they can also, if they see how we work, they can also organize a participation process or moment themselves for a different subject. So I think as soon as they've seen and done it a couple of times, they can try to do it themselves. But yes, not everyone is comfortable with it. It's something you have to learn, and you have to feel good about.
I also want to add, because this morning I went to a city who are doing a project on mobility, and we developed this project. It's called Jonge Wegweters, or Young Trailblazers in English. This is a project on mobility and young people, so the age between 16 and 18 years old, the last years of their secondary schools here. And we were asked to do this by the Department of Youth from the local municipality. And mostly these people are more used on participation with children, now youngsters, than any other department of the municipality. But it's about mobility. So we also have to involve the Department of Mobility, of course, and the mobility experts from the municipality. And this is always a very wonderful thing to see, is that it's really eye-opening to the mobility experts in how youngsters can talk about mobility as such an difficult and complex subject, but they can say a lot of good things about it, because they are using some routes every day, and they use it in different ways than a lot of adults. They don't have a car, so they are dependent on the public transport or biking or walking. So they use the city differently, and it's really opening up. And another thing that is very interesting, and what I hear a lot from the mobility experts, is that if they have participation with adults, it's about parking. It's about your individual use of public space. So you want your own parking spots as close as you can next to your house or next to a shop or so. But children don't look at mobility like that. They think about a lot broader. They think about different uses in public space. So it's also very opening. It's opening up the subject, which is sometimes very tough and rough, because people don't want anything to be changed in mobility. So that's just wonderful to work on with young.
Yeah, that sounds great that it's taking that direction. But I think in Sweden we're still at that point where we're trying to get people to dare to involve kids. So we're just curious if you could talk about in which way you involve kids and how you work with them and how you engage them.
Maybe first something about the timing, and then after that something about the methods. So you have to look at the planning of a certain project. So if you are going to redevelop a certain public space or a circulation plan or anything like that, you have to see where are we going to involve the young people, or children, young people. If you do it from the beginning and you stop then, they can only say something in the beginning, and then you take some things that they are saying, but maybe not so much. So it's mostly interesting to start talking about how they are using the public space as it is right now, and what are their needs, and what are their wants. What do they want? Do they want to have a playground, and what type of playground do they want, for example? Then the designer, our landscape architect, is going to make a first plan, and then it's time to involve the children again to so they can tell the designers, I like this. This something has to be changed. And then in the end of the project, you always also have to inform the children on what is going to happen with what they said. So this is important thing to look at the process. And then you talked about the methods. So there are different methods we use. For us, mapping is important to see how they go from one place to another. We use surveys, but not as much. Or we use a survey in the beginning of a research, but we always want to talk to the children, because then they can really explain why they said this in a survey, for example. And then if it comes to designing, we use our method, which is freely available, and it's called Pick to Play. It's very simple. There are just small icons on, for example, a tree trunk or grass or a swing or a zebra crossing, and they have to choose the icons and put them on a map, on a photo from above, and then they can write things next to it. So this is one of the example of the methods we use, but mostly in the process we use 6 or 7 different methods, depending on the subjects or the age group, or the circumstances. So, for example, we in a school, you have a different circumstance than when you're working in free time during their youth work activities. So.
Yeah, because I think we spoke about this earlier, that a lot of the time you go to the school to engage children. Is that how you get the kids to come?
Yes, usually we work together with schools because it's the easiest way to involve children from a certain area, because what we mostly do is when we do a participation process or when we are making a play space web, it's in a specific neighborhood, so you want to involve children from that neighborhood. Sometimes we try to involve children outside of school, but it's more difficult. And if you want to have children from different backgrounds that are from the same area and from a certain age, the easiest way is through school. Because if you ask them to come to a certain place outside of school in the weekend or in the afternoon, you might get a specific type of children, but when it's for an entire square or for an entire play space web, you get a good group of children if you go to a school. So this is usually how we do it, and we usually when a municipality wants to participate in one of our projects, because when we do our own research, like Sabine said, she's starting a research on play spaces for children with a physical handicap. We usually do a call, and then municipalities and cities can respond to the call if they want to be involved. And we usually also ask them, or there's a requirement that they cooperate with a school that wants to cooperate with us. This is the easiest way to find children to do, especially to do a participation project that is more than one time. So you make the agreement that you can go to their class 3 times, for example, to do it. Sometimes we do it outside of school. We just ask young people to come to a certain moment. We also do it through some municipalities. They have, or actually all municipalities have youth councils, but some youth councils work better than other. So that might be a chance to work with youth too. But yes, it's always a bit more difficult to engage children if it's not through school.
Then we attract them with pizza.
Yeah.
Oh, we learned that too. We had donuts. Donuts was the thing.
You can do it if it's a very place-based thing. Of course, what we also do, one of the methods we also have is we go outside and we go to talk to children that are playing outside in the street. If you want to work on a specific neighborhood or you want to work on a specific place, you go to the place and you talk to the people who are there. That's also an opportunity, of course, but that's not the moment. You can have a short interview on the street, but you can't really dig deep into a subject. So it also limits what you can do with them in a street interview.
Yeah. And when we worked with teenagers, we found that we need a different set of methods to work with them. And I think that you've also experienced that you have a model for working with teenagers.
I think a lot of the methods can be the same as with children. But of course, with maybe just the way you talk to teenagers or to young people is a bit different. But I think a lot of the methods are the same. But of course, like in any case, we always adapt them to the specific case. We have developed a couple of methods that are specific for young people, for older teenagers, such as jonge wegweters, young trailblazers that Sabine talked about earlier. It's specific methods to involve young people in mobility policy. One of the methods we have is an alarm clock walk, for example. We go on the street with a group of people and then the alarm clock goes off every minute, for example, and then they have a question about the mobility situation in the area. But actually, this is something you could also do with children. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's so different. One of the other methods then is a dialogue with a mobility official, a dream exercise they do about the mobility situation in their municipality, a budget game. So of course, a budget game can be a bit more complicated for older children than for younger children, but in itself, I wouldn't say it's so different.
Yeah, I think it's also more sometimes about the subject you talk about. For example, I did a project on girls in public space, and I did it with a group of different groups with the age group of 10 to 12 years old. They talk about a lot about their own neighborhoods. They're more focused still on their area where they live because they are not allowed to go alone outside of this area. And they talk about playing and playfulness and adventure, etc. And then if you go to an older age group, it's much more like I did a project in Brussels with girls from 16 to 21 years old. And then it's a lot more about sexual harassment on the street or feeling unsafe on the streets. So, of course, if you talk about these subjects, then the methods are also different. With the age group from 10 to 12 years old, it was more focused on designing and ideas and playfulness. And with the older age group, it was more talking about their own experience and how they feel and what the government can do about it, and also giving some policy advice on specific about specific areas or specific subjects. So that's more about conversation and feelings and feeling safe in a girls group, let's say.
Yes, because what we also experienced, like you have described when we've been researching your website, is that like teenagers, they're not seen as actual agents in their own town. And you have developed this regional thinking with the teenagers, like the teenage tissue or the weave that you call it. It's not play as much as it is their way of going around in the city that is more important, and where they can hang out and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, true. It's is much more on a regional level. They go to their secondary school, but they also find their free time in different spaces. So, for example, for the girls, it's the shopping mall becomes much more important. For example, or here in Brussels, the city center, which has some areas where you can hang out with enough social security, social control. But on the other side, the adults don't see you as a threat or annoying youngsters who are making too much noise. There's enough space to just be noisy and so on. But these are places that they have to find, and it's on a different level, let's say. Yeah.
So we're all preaching to the choir in here, to each other. We're all thinking the same thing. We love what we're doing, both your work and our work. But there must have been some obstacles on the way. Like, for example, in Malmö, usually when we say we want child-friendly streets, people say, well, they have the playgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we try to talk about that. So what are your antagonist arguments?
I think, of course, our main goal is to have more children play outdoor in public space, and no one is opposed to that. If you talk about children should play outside, everyone would say, yes, that's true. But as soon as it comes to, okay, then we need to make sure that there's less car traffic and cars should drive slower, and we really have to change something about our space, then it becomes more difficult. And yes, then people would say, yes, but they can play outside in our private garden, or they can play outside in that private space. So that's a bit more complicated, because I don't think anyone is opposed to outdoor play, but it's what kind of outdoor play do we want, and where should it be, and what are you willing to change for it to empower it more? I think that is something that not everyone agrees on.
No.
So yes, this is also something that we try to encourage, that we didn't used to focus, for example, on parents as a group that we talk to directly from Kind Samenleving. We talk more to municipalities, etc. But now we have this campaign that we're going to do that is aimed towards parents, because they play a very important role, and I think they should see that it's important that children play in streets as well, because it has become so uncommon in most places in Belgium. It has become quite uncommon to see children just playing outside in the street, whereas it used to be very common. Playgrounds didn't used to exist. That we should try to let them see again, okay, why do we need to go to playgrounds, and why do we need to go to fun parks to actually let our children play freely? And we need to try and change this mindset so people see the benefits of it, and what we can all learn from it, and what children can learn from playing outside, and that they can become responsible citizens that are less full of fear to go outside, because they've practiced it in their own streets when they were small. So I think it's not really that people are opposed to it, but it's also just that people don't really see the need.
Yeah, that's what we mostly encounter here as well. Now we've been talking about all the things that you do. What does your work look like going forward? What is your main goal for the future for Kind Samenleving, and how will you get there?
Such a big question.
I know. That's what we do.
No, we have seen I've been working for Kind Samenleving for 6 years now, and I've seen a change already. As Giselle was talking about, like realizing how important it is to play outside. This is something that more and more people are realizing, also because there is less space to play outside. So there isn't a big need to change this. But what I've seen in the last 6 years is that participation, for example, is playing a more important roles in municipalities nowadays. It's not so normal anymore to just redesign something without involving at least the adults. And for play space, it's also more normalized to also involve children from the neighborhoods to participate in this. So I hope that the municipalities who don't do this yet try to also get into this and get our expertise to help them. But also, how do you say that? That the municipalities or the Flemish government in general try to get the policy more focused on this. What I want to say is that, for example, if you're going to develop or redevelop a neighborhood, that it's asked to architects and landscape architects, urban planners, to think about the different groups that are going to use it. And this is also something that has changed, and I hope will be changed more, is that architects in the past thought about the built structure and not about the social constructs around it. Like, how can the buildings change the people? They have to think about it more, and I hope this is going to be normalized more, and that also like the new urban planners and architects that are studying right now are getting taught that these groups of people are important, and that you think about the uses of space. So this is something I'm looking forward to in the coming 5 or 10 years to
that sounds really good. But what, like you said, this would be your main message to urban planners. But what do you think, if you could dream, what would the city do even more of?
Well, just normalize child independency, like they can just move freely around from the age group of 8 years old, at least in their own neighborhoods. That it's just safe for children to go to their play spaces, to school, to their friends, and that it's just normalized to just move around as a free child again. This is, I think, something I would fight for, something like that. Yeah. And our organization as well. Yeah,
and I think also we spoke about this earlier, that there is not so much research that we can find about children's independent mobility and the consequences of it being diminished during the past decades. Kids don't have the same independent mobility that they used to have. And when we're talking to politicians or other people in power, it seems like it's a question they haven't even really thought about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's the kind of similar to what I was saying before, that now if you're a parent now, if you're a child now, there's a certain way of living, and we think this is normal, and we think it's normal that until, I don't know when, it depends of course, but maybe until 10, 11, 12 years old, children are not going to school by themselves. Usually, I think I would say around here, you think this is normal, but it's interesting when you start comparing to the past. Children always went to school on their own, with their friends and their siblings, in primary school even. And if you look at other countries, this is also a common practice. So I think it would require research. This is something we would also like to do, to research this autonomous mobility and how it changes. We haven't been able to do this yet, but we would definitely want to do it because we have the feeling, and also other organizations working with youth have the feeling that this autonomous mobility of children is has become a lot smaller, a lot.
The radius of
the radius has become a lot
Yeah.
smaller. Yes, and you don't necessarily see this as a problem if you don't think about the opportunities it might give to children, but also to adults when the autonomous mobility of children would be bigger. Because I think a lot of problems, daily life problems and daily life hustle would be taken away if children would just be more autonomous sooner. Again, because it used to be like this. I think children used to be outside in the streets all the time. It was normal until the car became so popular. So yes, that's definitely something that is definitely a subject that will remain important in the future.
Yeah, and also maybe because we also have experienced like stranger danger, that it's partly because of the car, but also partly because parents are afraid to let their kids out because of they're afraid of the strangers, but they're also afraid of how they might be looked upon by other parents if they let their kid out too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's is that same in Belgium?
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking about an example of the project of Girls in Public Space, where I talked to a group of young girls, age group 10 to 12, who are living in Antwerp, in a dense area. And one of the girls told me that she was allowed to go alone on the streets. Yeah, she didn't give the reason, but she told me that it was very important that she could go alone because that's the way other girls could also go outside. So she went to the house of a friend, rang the bell, and they could play together. But if none of the girls were able to go alone on the streets, none of them were able to play because they needed an adult to bring them to the other parents. And another girl told me that she was not able to go alone on the streets. Their parents didn't allow it because of a man on the streets, also the car traffic, that was a problem. And then she told me, but her father is going to the mosque every day to go for prayers. And during the time that he is in the mosque for the prayers, he was allowed to play in the play space. So they also try to look for opportunities to just go outside without needing needing other people or just with the help of parents.
Yeah, it's interesting how similar some things are.
Yeah.
But is there a way, because we want to know more about you, and I think the people listening here also want to know more about you, and they want to know where to find more information. And I know that we try to do some research, and it's a lot in Flemish. But is there any way to know more about what you do? Is there any digital channel or anything you could recommend that we read?
Yeah, we have some methods that we have translated in English, and also some publications. So we can share them with you, and you can put them in the show notes or what.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, and also I think maybe for all the things we write, because we also write a lot of articles, etc., it's a bit more difficult. But I think definitely for the methods that we have online, especially now with all the automatically translating software we have, if you have methods that are already quite visual, it might be useful even if they're not all translated yet to English, because a lot of our methods are very visual, work with images, and they kind of speak for themselves. And if you have a little bit of translation next to it, you might already be able to use them. So if you're really looking for methods to do participation and go to our website, you might already find some things. But yeah, maybe hopefully in the future, our website will be a bit more
International?
accessible and international, yes.
But we were also wondering if there's any organization or person or a city that have inspired you that you will tell us about. Maybe we can interview them in the future, someone or some organization that you think about that you've been inspired from or by.
Yeah, maybe a Flemish organization that is called Yes, and it's translated as Youth in the City. They are doing sometimes quite similar work as we do, but we get asked by a city and work for a certain time in an area and on a certain subject. But they are more youth workers. And working on for a longer time and really on the streets with children that come to them and trying to get them involved on a daily basis. And they are also doing a lot of actions and really redesigning a place. If it's a short time, just building something with the children or really redesigning something with children. And yeah, I just find them very inspiring because they are not really shouting about their big projects or something like that. They are just really hard workers and also work with groups that are not so easy to get. Youngsters that are hanging on the streets and don't know what to do and etc. So yeah, this is also a Flemish organization. Yeah. But also very inspiring.
We're gonna get good at Flemish in the end. I think there's a lot of action going on in Belgium.
A lot, yeah. I think that is something that I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm living in Belgium for a long time. But the Belgian people are always a bit like habits. It's just something small we do. They are not always very proud or showing off, and maybe we could do that a little bit more. And that's why also. It's so nice that you have invited us to this podcast and give us the possibility to tell about what we are all doing here. Yeah,
we are very inspired by all your work, and that's why we called you, because we wanted to learn more about you and maybe get a that we could cooperate more in the future together.
Yeah. And we also think that a lot of people in Sweden need to hear about you and things that are happening outside of Sweden so that we can get going here. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Giving us inspiration that we need so much.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
That's it for today. Hope you feel as inspired as we do. Do you sit there and think for yourselves, they should really interview this or that person or organization? Let us know. Send us an email. Otherwise, take care.